Welcome to today's Ads Fundamentals Bootcamp session, which is all about display and reaching audiences on the display network. We have a week full of trainings for you this week. So welcome back if you already joined us yesterday for the search session. Today we're talking about display. Tomorrow we have a session for you about YouTube. On Thursday we're talking about shopping. And then on Friday there's a session on app marketing. So we're covering the full spectrum of Google Ads for different solutions this week in order to update you on the latest and greatest, but also prepare you for your certification exams. You can ask questions throughout the session in the chat, and we'll be there to answer them. And I'm looking forward to the session. I hope you are too. So let's dive in. For those of you who I haven't met yesterday, let me quickly introduce myself again. My name is Christina, and I've worked with Google Ads for the last 11 years, which really is as long as it sounds. And I've seen a lot of exciting changes happen over the years. I started off as an account strategist with Google in the Dublin office in 2010, but then after a little while decided to leave and went to Berlin to work in the exciting world of startups there. And 5 years ago, I became a trainer and consultant. And on special days like today, I get to actually come back to Google and deliver bootcamp trainings like I am doing now. On every other day, I work with clients and manage campaigns, probably like most of you do as well. We talked extensively about search yesterday and how amazing the opportunity is to get right in front of somebody when they're looking for your product or service. And that is a great opportunity, but the problem is the customer actually decides when they see your ad because they are the ones that initiate it by putting a search query into Google. So if we want to grow our marketing activities beyond that, because at some point we will have maxed out that opportunity. If we are showing ads on every search that is happening, then at some point there's no more room to grow on search. So we need to look beyond that for new opportunities to show our ads. Or maybe we have an offering that people don't know about yet and they can't search for it because they don't know what they're searching for. So we need some more tools in our toolbox. And those tools better be good tools. As we've seen yesterday, consumers are bombarded with advertising messages every day at almost every waking minute. And it's not easy to get noticed in the sea of ads to achieve our business goals, at least not without a solid plan. The competition is high, so it's important that we know our customers well, what their journey looks like, and what they care about. And the opportunity is ginormous. 73% of US consumers stated that they're always on the lookout for brands and products. And our transatlantic neighbors might be a bit more into consumerism than us, but I bet you this number probably isn't going to be significantly lower for our part of the world. And here's another interesting statistic. 85% of consumers carry out a product-relevant action, like searching for the product on the internet, going to a store to see the product and potentially buy it, or purchasing online after finding a product they like. It sounds a bit like a random fact, especially the product-relevant action bit, but I would recommend you to make a note of it because you never know when stats like this can come in handy. For example, if you're taking a certification exam at some point in the future. If you were with us yesterday, you probably remember the story of my broken fridge and how I jumped across different devices and different platforms to solve my problem. And that is actually very much in line with what most of online users do. We know that around 90% of users switch between platforms to complete their tasks throughout a given day. And for us as advertisers, it's important to follow this pattern and to be present and relevant in the moment that matters along the customer journey. By using Google Display Ads, you can do just that. You will actually hear me and others also talk about the GDN a lot. As you know by now, in digital marketing, we love an acronym, and GDN stands for Google Display Network. And with ads in the Google Display Network, you can show different ad formats, image ads, video ads, text ads, and social ads that target the right audience on websites and apps. When marketers think of display ads, they often think of branding campaigns only, assuming that display ads cannot be used for direct response. After all, very few people actually click on these ads, right? But actually, nothing could be further from the truth. with display campaigns, you can increase both the traffic to your website and also the number of conversions you generate. A recent Wharton study that Google did together with Wharton University showed that display campaigns actually led to a 17% increase in website visits and an 8% increase in conversions. And this study was not focused on display campaigns that were optimized for performance, but display campaigns for all types of different goals. So by optimizing your campaigns for performance, you can actually achieve goals that are much higher than this, and the opportunity is large. You can find new customers and address your existing customers on the Google Display Network. And the Google Display Network consists of more than 3 million websites and apps, and you can reach around 90% of the global internet audience on it. So I would take a note of these numbers if I were you. You never know when they come in handy, but also 90% reach. That is massive. What we often get asked is, so what exactly does the Google Display Network actually consist of? So of course, the big Google-owned platforms like YouTube and Gmail are part of the GDN, but then also a lot of large publishers on the website monetize at least some of their content through Google Ads. So The Guardian, the New York Times, and 2,999,996 other websites or more are on there. And 90% is an impressive and industry-leading number, but of course, no marketer is looking to target every single user on the internet. We're looking for specific audiences, and the GDN also allows us to reach them at scale. And we can do that because the interactions that users have with Google's platforms provide us with very powerful signals of user behavior and intent. We don't just engage with users in the moment, but we see them several times a day during really the important moments of their customer journey across all our platforms, which gives us a lot of data to determine what their needs and desires are at the moment and which audiences they fall into. And if we focus on our business results and use machine learning to leverage all this data, we can acquire new customers. As an advertiser, we have to make sure we give the right inputs in line with our business goals. So that means we provide audience lists, we set up conversion tracking correctly, but also we provide the right creatives and product feeds. We can then leverage machine learning to automate and optimize our campaigns. And while that sounds sexy on paper and when it's written on a slide, in practice, it actually means giving up quite a bit of control and sitting through learning periods, which a lot of us, me included, have to get comfortable about. Because I think the longer you have worked in digital advertising, the more it takes to get comfortable with it. Because for the last 10 years, I have worked on optimizing campaigns and like pulling every single lever that I can control in order to make a campaign successful. So the idea of sitting back and letting an algorithm do the work doesn't really come naturally to me. And having the patience and the confidence in the systems that it's going to work and also manage customers through that, especially at the beginning of a learning period when KPIs might not be as we expect them, is also a skill that we as digital marketers actually need to build. But if the first two things are in place, the business goals and our familiarity with machine learning, we can then place ads on the Google Display Network and reach our business goals. So in today's training, we'll first understand what the right data is for which business goal and how we can provide the right input, and then look at how Google's unique machine learning algorithms use this data to find growth through display solutions. No matter what your business goal is, whether it's awareness and leads and sales, or even offline actions like store visits, we'll have a look at the solutions that can help us reach those goals, looking at display campaigns, smart display campaigns, and local campaigns in today's training. As we established earlier, we need to give the system the right inputs in order to achieve results. And these are the different types of inputs that we can give. The first one is conversions. Obviously, we need to have conversion tracking set up and decide what conversions we want to optimize for. We'll talk about that actually in more detail tomorrow during the YouTube session, because there is some time allocated for that. And today we just have so much other things to cover that we'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll talk very extensively about audiences and creatives today, and we'll also touch on feeds. And then the last input variable that also contributes to the success of our campaigns is the website, which of course is a whole topic in itself. I'm now going to take you through the setup of a display campaign in our demo account. I'm now going to show you how I create display campaigns in the demo account. And I'll create two different campaigns, a remarketing campaign and a prospecting campaign. And I'll keep them simple on purpose, because otherwise it is going to become a very long demo with not very much added value. But we will explore all the options during the training today, and I'll give you more context on those as well. So let's start with the remarketing campaign. What we need for the remarketing campaign is we need to have our audiences set up. And I've already set up the inputs for that. So I'm going into tools and settings and then to the audience manager. And then this is where you can see there's an optimized list that automatically gets created. And then I have created an all customers and an all visitors list, because what I want to do today, I want to target people with my ads who have visited the website, but who are not customers. So I need to actually create a combination of the two to use that in my campaign. So I click on create remarketing list, and here I have different options. So I can either create more lists, more like normal remarketing lists based on people who have visited the website. And if I wanted to create more segments, for example, of people who visited a category page or a product page, I could do that. Can also, if I have an app, I can use this section to target app users. I can target YouTube users, so people who have interacted with my YouTube channel or my videos, if I have that linked to my Google Ads account here. And this is where I can upload customer lists, which we'll discuss in a little while in this session as well. What I want to do today is create a custom combination of the two audiences I have. So I'll call this non-converters. And my non-converters audience is made up of all visitors and none of my customers. So I've now basically excluded the customers from them. And that's it already. So this segment is now ready to use, and we can go into the campaign creation. So from the campaigns section, we're clicking on add new campaign. And here we have the option to select a campaign goal. And if you tuned in yesterday, you will know that we should definitely do that. Yesterday I chose it with, I didn't choose one because I wanted to show you all the options, but on display today I will do this. So we want to drive sales with our remarketing campaign. And the campaign time we're using today is display. And here we have the option to choose either a standard display campaign or a smart display campaign. We'll do standard display for now. I'll show you a smart display campaign later. And here we select our, we enter our URL again to already tell the system what we're planning. And then we enter our campaign name, which I would call something like this. How you call your campaigns, I think, depends on how your organization and your agency does it. You might have an approach that you use for this. Then we click continue, and we can choose our campaign settings. The first is the location. So we're targeting the whole of the UK today. If you were with us yesterday, then you know that you can also target by radius or by specific postcodes if you use the advanced location targeting feature here. Then we can enter the language of our audience. On display campaigns, I usually use target language, whereas on search, I go with just all languages. And then here we have the option to also do some more campaign settings. So ad rotation is as a default set to prefer best performing ads, and on display that is also what makes sense. On search, it also what makes sense, but on search, you might want to do some A/B tests, but on display, especially with responsive ads, it just doesn't make sense. So we'll keep it like this and don't do anything with it. We can then set up an ad schedule if we only want our ads to show at specific times or specific days. But again, the bidding algorithm also kind of like takes care of that for us. So I usually don't limit this setting. And then we can choose which devices we want to show on. And this is actually different from how a search campaign works, because in a search campaign, you cannot choose the devices. In a display campaign, you can. So we could say we want our ads to appear only on computers, only on mobile phones, or only on tablets. And we can also select only specific operating systems or device models. It really, usually, I wouldn't use this to segment and have a desktop and a mobile campaign, just because we do cross-device nowadays and that's no longer necessary. But for example, I have a customer who makes cell phone cases, and they only make them for specific iPhone models. So then it just doesn't make sense to target Android devices, or to target the older iPhone models for which they don't sell cases. So that's a use case where this is handy. Otherwise, it doesn't, you keep showing all devices. Then we have campaign URL options, which are a more complicated tracking setting we're not going to go into. Dynamic ads, we're going to talk about a little later, and how to use feeds. So I'm not going to show you this now. We can set an end date if our campaign is only supposed to run for a specific time period. And then we have the conversion setting, where we, if we want our campaign to optimize for the same conversion as everything else in our account, we just leave this. But if we, for example, let's say all the campaigns in our account generally optimize for optimize for transactions in our online shop, but we want to run our display campaigns maybe for newsletter signups, then we could specify this for this campaign. And then we can also select the option to include view-through conversions in our conversion columns, which then also means that they get optimized for. And we also have the option to do content exclusions on our campaign. And how strict you are here depends on how squeamish you and your client are when it comes to where ads appear. So there's digital content labels, which is basically comparable to whether a movie is suitable for families or needs some guidance. You have also categories of sensitive content, which is generally always, I always include these just to be sure. And then you also have different content types, like whether you want your ads to appear on live streaming YouTube videos or on embedded YouTube videos, which are playing outside of YouTube. If you don't want your ads to appear, you select it. Or if you don't want your ads to appear below the fold, so they are visible when somebody first lands on a page, that is also an option to select, which in my opinion doesn't make a lot of sense. To select this, because then you're just massively limiting your reach. You have the option to exclude parked domains, or also to exclude in-video advertising altogether. So we've made the settings I want to make, and then I can enter the average budget that I want to spend each day. And the budget on the GDN has to be high enough to learn. But obviously, while it's learning, you also want to make sure that it's still efficient. But generally, if you're using smart bidding, your budget should be 10 to 15 times the target CPA. And the target CPA on display is, to start off with, should be twice your generic search target CPA. And this is why it might make sense to actually optimize for a different conversion. Because if you think that your target CPA on search is maybe £20 or €20, then your display target CPA to start off with would be 40, and then that times 10 or 15 leaves you with a daily budget of 400 or 600 euros, which is fine, but maybe you also want to start a bit smaller. So then you would optimize maybe for an add to cart click, which is cheaper. So you also can use a smaller budget. And then we can, in our bidding, we can decide what we want to focus on. And that then chooses our bid strategy for us. So right now I want to maximize conversions, and I could set a target CPA here, but I'm not sure what my retargeting display CPA is going to be. So I'll just let the system run with the budget and see where it goes. I actually also have to put in a budget. And we could also select a bid strategy directly if we know what we're doing, right? And we could even say, we could even select manual bidding here if we wanted. But of course, in order to leverage all the machine learning and algorithms, we should choose a smart bidding strategy. So we're doing that. And then we can add the targeting. And because we've already created our little list before, our retargeting list, we can now look for that either by searching for it. Takes a little while. If this takes too long, then you can also click on browse and you can actually go through the different types of audiences that exist. And we have detailed demographics, affinity, in-market and live events, remarketing lists, and here's also our combined audience segments. So it should appear. I'm not really sure why it doesn't, but then I will just use this opportunity to create it again and show you how to do this from the flow. So we're calling the segment non-converters. I'll call it new just because you will see that when I now create it, it's probably going to tell me that it already exists. And we use this match any of the segments or visitors. Again, the search doesn't seem to be my friend right now, but I can also just browse and go to my remarketing list. So we go all visitors here, and then we narrow our segment, and we say it should not. No, we don't want to narrow our segment. We want to actually exclude segments. So we say we don't want our visitors. And we don't want our customers. So again, browse because that seems to be much faster. So again, we've just created our non-converters segment. And now we have that included. So here we can add optimized targeting, which we will use in our acquisition campaign. And our remarketing campaign, we're not using it because it's a remarketing campaign. We don't actually want to expand our reach beyond this. So now that this is set up, we can create our display ad. And what we need for that, the first thing we need for that is a final URL. And it has taken our the URL we entered before, but since it's not an HTTPS, it wasn't an HTTPS domain the way we entered it, it's giving an error message. And now we're creating a responsive display ad. And that means that we have to upload our images and our logos. And you could do that very simply by just like dragging them here or choosing files to upload. But I have also done this before. So maybe I can find them here in the recently used section, and you don't need to wait until everything is uploaded. So this is the image which I want to use as my logo. So I select that, and then I have some more images here that I also want to use. So I will be using this one as my landscape image. And then I have the same, which I'm going to use as a square image. And then I have this one, which I want to use as a landscape image. And this one as a square image. And then this one is a landscape image as well. The square image, it's already selected basically. So see this here, we're using both image ratios actually, and here we're just using one. So that makes sense. And we have, for the sake of this demonstration, we have now 6 images selected. Like you could also use a lot more if you have them, but I'm mindful of our time. And then this error, so now it has worked. If we had a video, we could add that here as well, but we don't have one right now. So we'll just go with this, and then we can add in our assets. And with display, the assets, like we can reuse some of the headlines we have for search, but of course they have to be a bit more general and generic than what we would usually put on a search ad, just because there's no search context. So I have prepared some here. And then there's also another element that we can add is the long headline, which should be similar to the short headline. So there will only one of these will appear. So they can be duplicates also if you like, or they can be very similar also if you want. And then you can add up to 5 descriptions as well. So we'll add all of these. Also enter our business name, and we also have the option of saying here we can enable asset enhancements, and we can also allow the system to make auto-generated video from our images, if that's okay with us. Or we can uncheck this box if we don't want it, and we can also say allow or disallow to use native formats, but obviously we want to give as much reach and optimization potential as possible. The URL options, again, are tracking setting. I'm not going to go into now. And then in more options, you actually can customize the call to action text and just like select one which you want. So since we're doing a retargeting campaign, shop now is a good thing to go with. And you also have the option of adding custom colors. So as you can see here in the preview, see a preview that has an image in them. Like it's also taking guidance from the from the creative from the images when choosing the colors to use. But you also have the option to provide the hex codes of the main color and the exit color here to customize the ad more to the client's corporate identity, which is a very nice touch, I think. And once we're happy, we click create ad, and then the ad is created. And we can go and review our campaign. And publish our campaign, and that's us done. And then there are some errors in our ads, which we've had before. too large because it's too big, so we will just remove this one for simplicity's sake. Now we can publish the campaign. And if this wasn't a demo account, it would now start running. So we've actually created one ad group automatically in this flow, which if you've gotten to know me a little bit over the last 2 sessions, you like that I like things neat and tidy. So I will also name my ad group non-converters, because that is the audience that is being targeted. I'll then also now create a second campaign where we will, which we will use for prospecting, also for finding new clients. Again, we're selecting new campaign. We're saying sales. We're doing a display campaign. Doing a standard display campaign using true.live as URL, and we call this GDN UK and market. And then we click continue. We can again enter our location. In this case, it's United Kingdom. Target English. We leave most of these settings the way they are. We just exclude the sensitive content categories. We select next. We enter our daily budget. And again, choose maximize conversions as our bid strategy. And then move into targeting. And we are going to talk through some of the audience types for performance display campaigns in a bit more detail. But what we're not discussing today in the slides, and what is still good for you to know when you take the exam, is that on the Google Display Network, you have 2 different types of targeting. You can either target the user or the audience, which is what we're doing today, or you also have the option of targeting the context that the user is in. So you can use keywords to determine the theme of the website that your ad should appear on, or you could choose topics, which is just like a group of websites that are grouped into certain topics, or you can even select a placement. Basically, you tell, then in that case, you tell the system exactly where you want your ad to appear. The reason we're focusing on audience segments is because audiences leverage all the power of all the knowledge that Google has about signals and user situations and things like that. So it works much better with smart bidding, and scales also much better, because if you decide to run your ads only on a handful of placements, you compete with everybody else on those placements, and you might not achieve your growth targets. So let's have a look at audience segments, and then here we get some recent things, some recent audiences we used, and also some ideas. So we can see that here, or we can also browse through all the options that exist. And if this account had campaigns running, there would also be an ideas section here, which we'll see on a different slide later. So what we're looking for today is we're looking for users who are in the market to buy baby clothing. So we're looking at what they're actively researching or planning. And then we're looking at in-market segments and baby and children's products. And we can either just like select all of them, but actually it makes sense to go a bit deeper. So here we have baby and children's clothing, and we can even go deeper than that, and we can just select baby and toddler clothing. So this is the in-market segment that's bang on for the products that we're advertising. So that's what we're choosing. If you see here, there are also other things which we could advertise on if we have exhausted that. And there's also the option to create your own custom audience segments, which we'll talk about later in the slide. So now that we have selected that, And here it makes sense to also keep the optimized targeting on, because once like this is bang on. So then if the system finds more users who are also relevant, then it makes sense to expand the targeting. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in detail later as well. So then we can select next. We can create an ad here, but I will actually skip ad creation and show you a trick after, because this campaign is now will now be published. And what I want to do is I want to show you how we can copy an ad from one campaign to the next. So we're going into our retargeting campaign, and we're seeing the ad in there. I'm going to click the box, tick the box, and then we'll say copy. And once we're here, we can click paste. Select our campaign and our ad group. We can paste the ad into this ad group. And if you are using Google Ads Editor, that is a much faster way to do this. But this also works. Obviously, in a perfect world, you would customize the ads to the audience that you're targeting them for. So for demonstration purposes, we're not going to do that here, but when you build your campaign, you want to be more specific about that. So, and here we also want to rename our ad group to baby clothing. And if we look at the display campaigns which we have our converters campaign, which we just created, and we have our in-market campaign. I hope you enjoyed that. Now that we've looked under the hood, I'll give you all the background on the audiences that we actually just used. We're focusing on performance audiences today, which are using Google's intent signals to help you reach customers along the entire journey. And that includes people all the way at the bottom of the funnel who already know you and maybe are already your customers and you want to re-engage them and sell to them again, or users all the way at the top of the funnel who might not know you yet. All these audience types should be used in separate ad groups or maybe even in separate campaigns without overlap. And while we're looking at this beautiful visualization, I also need to tell you about another type of audience, which is not included in here because it's not a performance audience. It is more of a reach targeting method, but you also need to know about it because there are quite a few questions about it in the certification. And that audience type is called affinity audiences, which if you were to put it into this visualization, it would sit between live events and in-market and custom audiences. And affinity audiences are used to target people on the GDN in line with their hobbies and general interests. So it is where an in-market audience, that somebody has like a specific intent to buy a product. With an affinity audience, it's more that they have a general affinity to it, but it doesn't necessarily need to be on top of their mind for it. And as with in-market audiences, there's a wide categorization where you can find the exact type of audience that you need. For example, I run the same campaign for a travel advertiser each summer, and you'll hear a lot more about that on the YouTube training tomorrow because it's a YouTube campaign. But the targeting is the same on YouTube and the GDN, and it's a travel campaign, so we are targeting in-market audience. We are targeting an in-market audience, like targeting people who are interested in travel and like actively booking travel at that moment. But they also want to be top of mind for people who might not be actively researching traveling right now, but traveling later. So we're also using affinity audiences of people who travel who like different types of holidays and vacations. I'll now talk you through all of these different audience types in more detail over the next few slides. The first audience type is customer match, and customer match allows us to target our existing customers or our prospects if we have their contact data. The first step in creating a customer match audience is uploading a file with the customer's contact information into the audience section of our account. And there's also a template for that in the audience section of the account. In step 2, once the data is uploaded, it gets matched to user profiles, and these users get put into an audience list. The data is then deleted from the system. So customer data is actually never saved in the Google systems. It's just uploaded in a hashed format and then used to create the audience and then deleted straight away. And then in step 3, if you use the just created audience in your campaign, you can target the users on the list in your Google search campaigns, on your display network campaigns, in YouTube or in Gmail when these users are logged into their Google accounts. And if you're using a CRM platform like HubSpot or Ometria, you can also automatically create customer match audiences and push them straight from the platform into Google Ads without the need of actually creating a data file and uploading the list. That does not only save you a lot of time, but it also keeps your audiences fresh. The next audience type is remarketing. And with remarketing, you can reach people who have previously visited your website and taken different actions. In order to create a remarketing list, you need to either install the Google Ads remarketing tag to your website and build the audiences of that, or you can also use Google Analytics and create your audiences there and push them into your Google Ads account. Some standard audiences will always automatically be created, for example, all visitors to your website, but then you can create more specific ones yourself. So on this slide, we see an example for an online shop where we segment users into visitors of the homepage, visitors of category pages or a specific category page, visitors to a product or offering page, visitors who canceled the purchase process or abandoned the shopping cart, and then users who already have made a conversion. And for different business models, this can look differently. For example, I have a finance client for whom I do remarketing, and there we also have visitors who just visited the homepage. We have visitors who visited more than one page on the website because we know they're a bit more seriously interested. And then we have separate lists for each step of their application form because they have several steps, and sometimes there's also some time in between they get filled in. So we want to make sure that we can retarget the people who drop off in one of the steps. And depending on where a user is in their journey, through either the purchasing journey on an e-commerce website or through the lead sign up journey on a different type of website, maybe you want to target them with different messages, because depending on how far they got in the journey, they might have different interests. They might respond to different messages. So if somebody has only really come to your homepage, yes, they're interested, but you haven't really managed to draw them in yet. So you need more general advertising, more general messaging, like discover great deals, and draw them in with that. Whereas if somebody abandoned the shopping cart, then you only really probably need a small little thing to draw them over the line. So you could give them a free shipping message. Customer match and remarketing are the two audience types at the very bottom of the funnel, which help you target existing customers or users who are already familiar with your brand or your products or your offering. So we'll now make the jump into prospecting, which means working to acquire new customers. A great way to reach new potential customers that are actually similar to users on your existing customer match or retargeting list is the similar audience feature. So similar audiences use a lookalike technology to just find the statistical twins, if you want to say so, of the users on your remarketing or customer audience match lists, which will have will be in similar situations and have similar intent. And similar audience lists will automatically appear in your audience manager in your account if they are eligible seed lists, so eligible remarketing or customer match lists, and you will just see them because they magically appear once they're ready. The next audience type are in-market audiences, and in-market audience consist, who would have thought, of users who are in the market for a specific product or service. These are pre-curated lists across a wide range of categories that you can find in your Google Ads account, and we saw them earlier in the demo also. If your offering falls into one of these categories, then the best practice is to definitely use these first before you try custom intent lists, because these have been put together by the Google Display teams for that specific purpose. If there are no matching in-market segments for you, or you have maxed out your in-market segments, or you want to experiment with creating your own audiences, you can use the custom audience feature. So with the custom audience or custom intent audience feature, you define what your ideal target audience is looking for by entering keywords, URLs, or app information that are relevant to your product or service. And then these are used to create an audience that has intent around these topics. Here are some tips for custom audiences. Always start with the automatically created segments with the in-market target groups, because they have automatically been created for you and are validated already. But also have a look at what other suggestions Google Ads gives you in your account in the suggestions of the audiences. And then if you build your own custom intent audiences, choose about 15 keywords or URLs that are representative of how the customer would find you. So 15 is the magic number for that. And the last audience category from our list is live events and demographic targeting. And live events targeting lets you access consumers who are experiencing important life milestones in their life that may affect their purchasing behavior. So for example, having a child, buying a house or moving house, or getting married. And if you've been through one or more of these, you will know that that means quite significant change. And also with that significant change often comes the need to purchase new things or maybe make a trip, and are therefore very good opportunities to show some relevant ads. And then apart from the live events, there's also demographic targeting, like age and gender targeting, employment targeting, parental status targeting, education and household income, which is available in some markets, which you can also use as additional signals on your campaigns. Now that we have looked at all these audiences in detail, you are ready to build your strategy. And your strategy should consist of two parts. The first is your remarketing strategy, which you use to re-engage customers who have already bought from you or who at least already know you at the bottom of the funnel. And then the second part is your prospecting or your new customer acquisition strategy, where you work your way upwards through the layers from similar audiences all the way up through live events. While working your way up through the different audiences of the funnel for customer acquisition, there's a feature that can be very useful to help you scale, and that is the expand targeting feature. So the expand targeting feature helps you achieve more conversions with the same return on investment on an audience. So if you have for example, an in-market audience, an ad group with an in-market audience, which is doing well for you, you can then turn on expand targeting, which is going to find users who behave similarly to those you have targeted, and you just get more reach and ideally the same results. So a best practice is to actually take full advantage of this feature before targeting new audiences in the upper buying funnel. In your Google Ads account, we have 3 ways that help you find suitable audiences, as you've also seen in the demo. The first one is by simply searching for something. If we know what we want, we can just type that in. And that is the fastest way to find something, because that just searches through the entire catalog of audiences that exist. If we don't really know where to start, then browsing is a great option. That's also what we did when we were looking for the right in-market audiences during our demo. Or especially if your campaigns have been running for a little while, then there'll also be an ideas section where you will get recommendations from the system that you otherwise might not have thought of. And this is also a great place where you can find audiences that the system has automatically generated for you. The common pitfall that we often see causing problems with these performance audience campaigns is that there are too many audiences targeted or even layered in one campaign within one ad group, because these performance audiences actually work best if they're targeted one by one and not combined with each other, because then the overlap might be too small and the audience might become too small. Some other best practices start at the bottom of the funnel for the best performance and then scale up and go up layer by layer as you need to add reach. Max out each level and also use the targeting expansion and do not skip any layers. Separate ad groups for different stages of the funnel. And you should keep your ad groups tightly themed with ad content tailored to the audience so that it is relevant. This actually concludes our audience section. We are now almost halfway through the training, so great job for hanging in there. If you have any more questions on audience, put them in the chat and we will continue on to creatives. We've now talked quite a bit about the different ways to target and how to set up our campaigns with the different audiences. But the most important part of every display campaign is the creative, because that is what the user sees and what has to connect and to resonate. Actually, 75% of advertising impact is determined by the quality of the creative. So there's only so much we can achieve with having good targeting. If the creative doesn't work, then our campaign is unlikely to be successful. And in order to create effective assets that really connect with the audience, we have 4 steps here that you can follow. Step 1 is have a really good definition and understanding of your audience. Sometimes I talk to clients, and when I ask them who their audience or their target customers, they say everybody is a good customer for my product. And while it might be true in theory, that's not how you make a potential customer feel special and get them to engage with you. So you need to have a razor sharp definition of who your audience is and what they care about. Good way, if you don't yet know that, is to actually talk to them. Because then you don't only find out who they are and what they care about, you also find out which language they use to talk about their problems and about their needs and about their desires. So you can then reuse that in your creative. When you define that, you might also discover that you actually have several subsegments of customers that might need a slightly different approach. So you can then build out those subsegments as well. And then you can build different value proposition sets for each of those segments. And all of this goes into your briefing that you share with your creative team. Or if you are the one who also makes the creative, which sometimes with smaller customers and agencies is what is done. And if you have the creative skills, then that's great. That's not something that I should be doing, definitely. Then also have that in mind and think back to who is my customer? What do they care about when you put your creative together? Basically a good creative comes from a good brief. And once you have the creative, you deploy the assets, and then you also see how all the creative assets are performing and look at that. Look at the data, and if you're working with a creative team, also feed back the insights that you get from that to the creative team and iterate on your creatives. And here's an example of how businesses can provide solutions for customers and communicate that through creative. So the example is of a hotel, and the audience is a business traveler who's also a fitness enthusiast, who is between 30 and 35 years old, and who is also a parent. And if we have a look at her interests, we can divide them into pains, into gains, and also into jobs to be done that all need to be addressed. So her pain is she has an intense schedule because she has children and also has a lot of work. She does like to exercise daily because that just helps her deal with all the stress that maybe her work gives her. And what she needs to do when she's traveling for business, obviously, she needs to meet business partners. So how does this hotel advertiser help her and helps her reach her goals? In order to address the pain of the intense schedule, they provide an airport pickup, which makes arrival so much easier because then she doesn't need to arrange it for herself. As a gain, they have an on-site gym that's open 24/7, so she can exercise whenever it fits her schedule best. And the jobs to be done, the reason she comes to the hotel is they have on-demand meeting rooms, which she can book and meet her business partners right in the hotel and doesn't need to travel places, which would make her schedule even more intense. So these benefits and offers that the advertiser offers the potential customers should come through in the creative. And the creative consists of text assets and image and video assets. So the text assets can clearly mention the benefit, the features that give the customers the benefit, like the pickup, the on-site 24/7 gym, and the meeting rooms. And then the image and video assets can obviously show the product and the product or the service, which in this case is the hotel room, which is like a really nice and serene settings, but then also can show additional features like the meeting rooms and whatever the features that address the pains and the gains in a visual way. We've just seen how we can tailor creative to a very specific use case for one customer and seen this in one example. But in order to make ads relevant at scale, especially if we have a lot of different products and we make them relevant to a lot of different customers, we can use feeds to customize our ads. We use feeds to provide input for an ad that is based on what a user has previously looked at on your website or in your ad. So basically, we're doing dynamic remarketing. And if we want to do this for retail, which is probably the most common use case for dynamic remarketing, we can do this through our Google Merchant Center and use our Google Shopping feed for that. We'll talk about that in our shopping session on Thursday. But many people don't know that it's also possible to do feed-based display ads for lots of other different industries, for example, education, travel, employment, local opportunities, or real estate. So let's have a look at an example of a feed here. A feed, basically, it's just a list of attributes. So it has unique IDs, images, and prices, and you can create a feed that fits your specific business. You can find templates and useful specifications in the Google Ads help. And then dynamic retargeting will use details from these feeds in ads to provide the relevant information. So here's an example for a flight booking feed, for example, where there's a flight to London City and a flight to Heathrow, and then it has a URL and it has a price, and it will also have an image link to it. And then these details feed into an ad. And that's what that looks like. Dynamic retargeting will use these details to present relevant information to the users who have visited your website. So you have the feed, and then machine learning is used to both detect characteristics of potential customers as they are browsing the web and using their behavior as signals when and what ad to show them. But machine learning also looks at the performance of your feed and determines which products to surface at that specific point to the customer. And all that is then the input for the dynamic ad that the customer sees. That is another very important chapter of today's training done, the creative part. And we'll now look at the next campaign type, which is local campaigns. Local campaigns are a special type of campaigns that optimize specifically for store visits or other local actions like clicks on directions or clicks on your business's phone number. If you want to optimize for store visits, you need store visit conversions in your account. So you need a business location with enough footfall for them to surface. You can talk to your account manager if that applies to you and you want to learn more about that. And then what a local campaign does is it basically has fully automated targeting across all Google networks and products. And it's very simple to set up and also scales very simply. A local campaign drives store visits or other local conversions across platforms, so in local searches, but also on Google Maps. And the great thing about a local campaign is you actually get your customized little maps icon. So your logo appears on Google Maps instead of just the red pin, which also is then visible for everybody else who uses Google Maps. Like that already is a great USP, why a lot of my local clients actually use local campaigns just because they want to have that presence in Google Maps. It can also appear on business profiles and on YouTube and on the Google Display Network. And to show you how easy it is to set up a local campaign, I will show you a demo and we will set up one together. Here we are to create our local campaign in our demo account. So you can just click campaign on the plus for the new campaign, click campaign, and then select the goal which we want. And in this case, we're going to select local store visits and promotions because that is what we want to achieve. And then that gives us the option to select the campaign type local. And here, what we need to select is the type of locations that we want to advertise in our campaign. And we can either use our own business locations if our account is connected to our Google My Business account, or like we have set this up here, we've set it up to use affiliate locations. So locations of shops where our products are sold. So for example, if we're a consumer goods company, then we can select a supermarket chain. And then we could also make location groups if we only want to want our ads to appear for specific locations. Then we can click continue, and we get into the campaign creation flow. So we need to name our campaign, locations UK, and we call this, we are now advertising for a dog school. Again, we're advertising in English, and we're setting our daily budget. And on a local campaign, what one of my account managers last told me when I set up a local campaign for a client, it actually needs to have at least 100 euros daily budget for 30 days, because the local campaign needs to generate enough store visit data. So it needs to generate enough footfall into the location. And because store visits aren't tracked on an individual basis, so a local campaign is not going to be like, oh, Christina, we know Christina's device ID, so we know when she goes to a store, so that's a conversion, but it uses statistical models, because that like that type of like person and location tracking isn't how it works. So it just needs like a certain amount of data to go by. Then the bidding is maximize conversion value, which is clear for which is always the same for local campaigns. And then here we can select the conversion actions that we want our our campaign to optimize for. So if we had shop visits, then we could click that here. Since we don't have it set up in this account, because you actually need a location that has some footfall in order for this option to become available to click, we are just selecting the local business options of like call, clicks, and driving, and people clicking on the call number and people seeing the driving directions to our locations and have like allocated a value to those. So we are optimizing for that instead. Here we could set up an end date if we wanted, but we want our campaign to run always. So we keep it without an end date. And then we set up our ad group name, which is the local location, local, just call it local. And then here we can enter our business information. Like we're working with a dog training today. And we're actually advertising a German business, which is called Heimathund. And our destination URL, business this, and we can also put a display path in like we do in our search ads. So we can put dog training in Hamburg. Find a German city that doesn't have too many umlauts in them, so we can easily enter it here. And then we have to add up to 5 headlines, which I have prepared already. Prepared for London, but I can easily adjust them. So these are headlines, so they also should go into the headlines section, not in the description section. Headlines in local campaigns have 30 characters like they do in search campaigns as well. But then the descriptions actually only have 60. So we need to take that into account. Training classes, we need to shorten these a little, but if you've worked in Google Ads for a while, then shortening ad copy to fit character restrictions is probably a strong suit of yours. I have certainly become quite good of that over the years. Here, dog training, so let's make this training because it already says dog in the headline. So it's training with qualified trainers, private and group sessions. And then we have a call to action. Now learn more. Dates. And then here we can select our images and logos, which we will get off our website, hopefully. And for demonstration purposes, let us pretend that this is our logo. So then we still need to add some imagery as well. So we'll select this one as an image. This one also is a really good one, and we're selecting the square format. We're selecting it for the square format, and then we're using this. And we're using this one as well. It's in the logo, but I thought I had to select a landscape logo as well. So we set this up. Select it like this. If we had videos, we could add them here as well. We actually have one. Question is whether it's long enough or whether it's too long or too short. So we use this one. And then we save and continue. And you can here also see on the map, you actually saw that now the the map pin was customized and had our logo in it. So it's no, and this is how your map pin will now always appear on Google Maps. And that is the local campaign ready, which really was not very difficult. I hope you agree with me. Do you have any questions on local campaigns? If so, pop them in the chat because we're moving on to the next topic. We've talked about the importance of great creative earlier, and in this section we're going to look at how we can set the creatives up in the system and how machine learning helps us show the best possible creative to each user. For our performance display campaigns, we can use responsive display ads, which are the equivalent to the responsive search ads we talked about yesterday, just for display. So we can include a bunch of different assets into our campaign, which are then combined by the system to the best possible combination for the user in the situation that the user is in. And here's a list of the assets that we can provide. We can provide a video, and we have to include the name of our company so that the user knows who the ad is coming from. We have the long headline. We also upload a logo. We upload 5 descriptions, 5 images or more, and then also headlines. And you've seen this already in the demo, like what exactly this looks like. The best practice is always to supply as many assets as you can to give the system as much as possible to work with. Machine learning uses all the assets you provide to do creative testing across millions of ad combinations on the GDN, on Gmail, and on YouTube. And it learns what works best by comparing the actual results to the predictions it made, thereby constantly refining itself and getting better and better and better. And we've actually seen that advertisers get 50% more conversions when they add responsive display ads to their campaigns. And why that is because if you just use standard image ads, which use defined dimensions, like the standard dimensions, like the medium rectangle, the super banner, the white skyscraper, the skyscraper, that inventory is limited, and almost every advertiser in the world is only using these formats. So the competition for the placements that have these formats is very, very high. Whereas if you have a responsive display ad, the assets can be combined in a way that works across every size. So you have a much bigger inventory of where your ads can show at your disposal, which helps, as well as the increased relevance. When it comes to selecting imagery for your display ads, it's actually very easy, as you've also seen in the demo. We can either upload our own imagery, we can also scan our websites or our social profiles, and if we don't have the right imagery, we can also have a look at Google's selection of free stock images. And the good thing is the dimensions required are the same that you already have, because it's usually a square and 1200 by 627 image, which is the size that is used across many social networks as well. And responsive display ads also support video assets, which attract potential customers with images, sound, and movement, which is great because an image already says more than 1,000 words, but then a video is a lot of images, so we can just convey much more complex messages. And what we've also seen in Google's data is that responsive display campaigns that have video have 5% more conversions than responsive display ad campaigns that don't have a video. You can optimize the assets in your responsive display ads by using the asset report that you find in your account. So every 2 weeks, you should have a look at the performance, and then you can see which assets perform best, which assets perform good, and which assets have a low performance. And you should replace the assets that have a low performance with a better alternative to achieve the best results with your campaign. And that brings us already to the next campaign type and also to the last big chapter of today's training, and that is smart display campaigns. Smart display campaigns are a great lever for scalable growth because they leverage all the machine learning that Google Display has to offer. For audiences, all the targeting is actually automated, and the smart display campaign helps us reach people at all stages of the buying journey. So it re-engages existing customers, but also helps us find new customers. Ad creation and ad testing is simplified through responsive display ads. And of course, the smart display campaign also uses smart bidding to help us achieve our goals faster and aligns with our business goals. So the only inputs that we need to give a smart display campaign is our target CPA or our target ROAS, or just the goal of maximize conversions. We have to set up a creative budget and we have to supply creative assets. And then Google finds us the right user and deploys the right bids for them. It runs the ads on the right inventory, and it deploys the right creative in the right moment using our assets. And this is how smart bidding and creatives work in our smart display campaign. Bids are optimized proactively and in real time for each individual auction, taking into account all the signals that we have of the user. So their location, their operating system, their browser, their device, but also the time of day, and also everything that we know about them when it comes to audience and search and previous search behavior. And our ads are also automatically optimized to deliver the most effective combination of creative assets in that moment. So choosing the right headlines, the right imagery, or the right video. And here are a few more statistics and numbers on why smart bidding is great. It gives us a higher conversion volume. Actually, smart bidding campaigns have around 20% more conversions compared to manual bidding campaigns on average. It gets a lot of input from both user behavior, generally around, like it's using data from around 140 billion auctions, but then also has around 70 million variables per auction because of all the user data that it has. And then it also unlocks access to new inventory that we otherwise wouldn't be able to target in our campaigns. And of course, it also results in significant time savings because we don't need to calculate bids manually. We don't need to create ads for like all the different specific formats. So that frees up more time for strategic tasks and important conversations with customers. Here's an overview of the smart bidding strategies that we can use on display. So we can use maximize conversions, where we just give the system a budget, and then the budget sets out to achieve as many conversions as possible within that budget. That's actually a good strategy to use if we are not yet sure which target CPA or which target CPA we should be using. So we can use that to explore. With target CPA, we can align our campaign settings with our goals, but the target CPA that we set has to be realistic. Otherwise, the campaign is just not going to deliver. I've just taken over a client actually where the person who previously managed the account set up display campaigns with the target CPA that was too low, and what you then see is that the campaign volume, like for the first few days, the system still tries to hit that CPA. But then once it realizes that it can't be done, the campaign just stops delivering. So make sure that if your target CPA is realistic, or if you don't yet know what a realistic target CPA on display is, you use maximize conversions to find out. And then the third option is target ROAS, which, like target CPA, also has to be set realistically. And then what it does is it takes both the probability of a conversion and the potential conversion value into account when deploying the bid. So it's going to bid higher on a user that's going to make a bigger purchase with you than it would on a user who usually buy for smaller amounts from your shop. One brilliant feature that has helped me work with a lot of customers who were very skeptical about running display ads is actually the target CPA pay for conversions option. And what happens there is you never pay more for your campaign than the CPA, and you only pay when conversions occur. So how this works in practice is you have an impression, a click happens, and then a conversion happens, and the conversion is calculated based on the impression day, and then the cost accrues in your campaign. So usually you get charged for clicks, and you kind of like see the cost in the campaign running up, and then conversions occur, and that is used to calculate the CPA, and you kind of can only look at it like retrospectively. But with pay for conversions, the cost only appears once a conversion happens. So it is a risk-free way to try display advertising. Of course, again, the CPA has to be realistic. Otherwise, the campaign is just not going to run for a very long time. Setting up a smart display campaign is very simple, similarly to a local campaign. And I will show this to you now in a quick demo. In the last demo of today, we're going to set up a smart display campaign. So again, we'll go into our campaigns tab and then click on the plus button and select new campaign. We choose our campaign goal. It could be either sales or leads, but let's go with sales. And then we select a display as the campaign type. And this time we choose the option of smart display. And we're giving it our URL so that it has something to go by. And then we also give it a campaign name, GDN UK Smart Display. We are going to target the whole of the UK. We'll keep the language to English. Then we can either start with maximize conversions or already set a target CPA, and the target CPA should be twice the CPA from our generic search campaigns. So if let's say our sales CPA on a generic search campaign is 20 euros, then our target CPA here should be 40. And we can here choose whether we want to pay for clicks or viewable impressions. If we had enough conversion data in this account, the option to pay for conversions would appear here as well. So if you want to pay for conversions and you have enough data for the system to allow you to do that, you can select that option in this drop-down. Then here's where you select your daily budget. And on a smart display campaign, the budget should be 10 to 15 times the target CPA, just so that the system has enough to play with. So in this case, we go with 400. And then if we have a feed, because we have our Merchant Center connected, we could select that here, but we don't have that set up for this account, so we don't. Here we have some additional settings where we could select the conversion setting, and if we wanted to optimize for a different conversion than the rest of the account, as I explained before. We can do some content exclusions. And those are all the campaign settings done. And then we will create an ad group. And in a smart display campaign, because really the only input variable that you give is the creative. So we'll call this ad group baby grows, because it will have the baby grow creative. So let's put the right display URL in, the right final URL in with the landing page. Then we can select our images and logos from here. Right now it's actually scanning the website. But we could also just go, if we don't want to wait for that, could also just go into the recently used one, because we made a campaign for this earlier, so we can just see the logo is here, which we can select. And then we have some baby grow images here that we can use. This one, this one, this one, this one. And then if on the website we have found something that is actually nice, I mean, this is, yeah, this is also a good idea to use, because it looks quite nice in this format actually. And then maybe we'll use this one as well, because it's just fun product. So here we have selected all our images now and a logo. And we can then put in our headlines, which we used before. Like in a good cooking show, I have them prepared on hand. We have the normal headlines, then we have the long headline. And we have our descriptions as well. Enter our business name, and we can customize the call to action, but in the smart display campaign I'll give the system the freedom, and we can also set up custom colors if we have the hex codes at hand. But I'll leave that for now, and we just add the creative to the ad group and then create the campaign. And you can see that was very, very quick. And we are done creating the smart display campaign. See, it really was that simple. If you have any more questions on smart display campaigns or anything else we've covered before, please pop them into the chat. So as a summary of everything that we've talked today, here is what your campaign setup and your display strategy could look like. You will have up to 5 different types of campaigns, because local campaigns are not pictured here. So that would be smart display campaigns and local campaigns, which are your one-stop shops for performance, because the audience targeting is automated across the whole customer journey. And then you have standalone display campaigns, discovery campaigns, and also TrueView for Action campaigns, where you will probably divide your approach into remarketing and prospecting or customer acquisition. Standalone display is the campaign type we did first today in our session. Discovery campaigns we haven't covered today, but they're specific, like a subtype of GDN campaigns, which we can even hold like a complete separate session about, but that's what's important about it to know. It works very similar to normal display campaigns. And then there's TrueView for Action, which is a YouTube campaign. And we'll talk a lot about that tomorrow. So that's something to look forward to. So in these 3 different campaign types, like I said, we can split our campaigns into remarketing and prospecting campaigns. The remarketing might be dynamic or might not be dynamic, depending on your business and your setup. And we'll probably use remarketing lists for specific segments of your site and also customer match. And then in your prospecting or customer acquisition campaigns, you use the audience solutions that we have discussed today. Then there are a few best practices also in the bottom of this slide that we would like to remind you of. All our performance solutions on the GDN are powered by Smart Bidding to help you achieve your best results. So use them, either maximize conversions, target CPA, or target ROAS. And there's also the bid and budget recommendations that you should take into account when setting up your campaigns. You want 10 to 15 times the target CPA as your daily budget, because only then do the algorithms have enough data to actually work with. And as your target CPA, you want to use 2 times your generic search CPA as an estimate to start with, to give the system enough chances to actually deliver your ads. And then you can optimize that over time. And that already brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found it useful and are pros when it comes to audience and display advertising now and are well prepared to take your certification exam. We'll be sending you an email later asking for your feedback. So as always, we really appreciate if you let us know how you found the session so that we can improve our offering for you in the future. And I am looking forward to seeing you tomorrow for the YouTube session.